Thank you. Thank you very much for a very warm welcome. I'm very happy to be here in Hawaii because I want to learn about harmony between different peoples, different cultures. Burma is starting out on the road to democracy. Some people think we've got there, but I always say that we're just starting out. We're preparing the ground. The ground is there, has to be prepared. It has been prepared to a certain extent, but we have to plant the seeds of democracy, and we have to make sure that they flourish. And how a tree grows up depends very much on how it is tended and nurtured. And we hope to nurture our democracy through peace, through compassion, through harmony. Because we are a nation of many peoples. We are a union. When Burma became independent in 1948, we called it the Union of Burma, a union of many ethnic nationalities. But we have never yet achieved the true harmony that we wished for. We are still divided in many ways. And I hope to learn from the people of Hawaii how we can reconcile differences and how we can build unity out of diversity, how we can make diversity a strength rather than a weakness for our nation. Basic to all this is an emphasis on peace and compassion. I do not think that you can separate peace from compassion, because peace begins from the heart. Unless there is a spirit towards peace that is inclined towards peace, you cannot achieve peace. And the inclination towards peace in the spirit is very much dependent on compassion for those who are different from you. Compassion is different from generosity. It is different from love. It is, in fact, more precious than love because, as some people have remarked, love and hate are very close to one another. But compassion is totally removed from hatred. And we want to build a nation, a society that is totally removed from hatred. Well, perhaps not totally, because that's not humanly possible, but as totally removed from hatred as humanly possible. And on this basis, we want to build up a nation that will benefit from the lessons that other nations have learned. I have said repeatedly over the last 12 months or so that our great advantage is that we're behind everybody else, so we can learn from their successes as well as their failures. We can choose from what other people have done, what we think would be beneficial for our people and what would not be. Yesterday evening, I was having dinner with friends on Waikiki Beach, which is considered one of the most beautiful, most desirable places on this earth. And it was lovely. Everything was beautiful. My friends were lovely. The food was lovely. The scenery was lovely. But it occurred to me that in spite of all that, I'm happy to be in Burma struggling with my people. We are not rich yet. We are perhaps not as beautifully laid out materially as you are here, but I'm happy with my people who are struggling to overcome their weaknesses, to overcome our difficulties. But we hope that our friends will help us in our struggles, because struggle can be beneficial if we approach it in the right way. I do not believe that suffering necessarily elevates or cleanses. But if you cope with struggle in the right way, you will build up the kind of strength that is necessary to construct a society that will ensure justice and peace for its peoples. And this is what we're aiming at. There can be no justice without peace, and there can be no peace without justice. I'm not saying this simply because I'm the chair of the Committee for Rule of Law and Tranquility, but I like the name of the committee very much. It makes some people smile, the tranquility part. But I think it's very important. Rule of law should aim at tranquility. That, after all, is why we want law and order, not in order to crush people, not in order to suppress people, but in order to ensure that everybody enjoys both independence and security, both freedom and security. When people ask me what I mean by democracy, I often say that what I mean is a system that will give us both freedom and security in the right balance. In the name of security, many authoritarian governments have deprived their peoples of freedom. But in the name of freedom also, the security of people have been destroyed. So what we are looking for is a society where there is a harmonious balance between freedom and security, based on a foundation of compassion, based on a foundation of respect for differences between cultures and traditions. Because our ethnic nationalities adhere to different traditions, different cultures, and I would like to keep all these alive and vibrant, but controlled by the necessary for all to be in harmony, not controlled by outside forces, but by internal forces, each ethnic group recognizing the rights and the values of other groups and coming together to build up national values that will be able to keep us all united together, united in harmony, in understanding, and in the desire to bring about what would mean progress for the whole country, not just for one particular part of the nation. I hope that as we work towards this, what might seem to people very idealistic goal, which I think is actually very practical. It is not idealistic to go after the kind of goals that will ensure future harmony and unity in a society. As we work towards these goals, I hope that we will have you with us, friends who understand what we are going through, because the people of Hawaii understand that this beautiful society was created through much sorrow, through much struggle, and through much suffering. But you have come to a point when you have learned to cope with your differences and to build up a particular culture of peace and harmony. And this is what we are seeking, striving to achieve. So I hope that we will have your help on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, several of you have turned in questions, and amazingly how much the questions reflect the discussion that we had here at this table and also the remarks that you made. But I will start with one that has not come up yet. It's a very simple question in some ways. It says, if it were up to you, what would you like to call your country? Burma or Myanmar or something else?
Yes, if it were up to me, I would like to call my country Burma. And let me explain this. The reason why I have always referred to my country as Burma rather than in Myanmar is because the name Myanmar was imposed on the country by the military dictatorship back in the I think somewhere around about 1989 or 1990. Suddenly, just one day, it was announced that Burma would be known as Myanmar from then on. The reason given was that Burma was a name imposed by the colonial government of the country, and that Myanmar referred to all the ethnic peoples of the country, and not just to the Burmese ethnic group. Now, that, of course, is factually incorrect, because Myanmar is simply a literary form of Burma, which simply means the Burmese ethnic group, not the others. And in any case, I do not think that any government should impose the name of a country or a name on a country without reference to the will of the people. And also this assertion that we have to get rid of the name Burma because it was a colonial legacy, I find narrow, and I think it reflects lack of self-confidence rather than anything else. If we consider the names of Japan, China, India, Indonesia, Philippines, well, we can go on. You could say that these were names imposed, if you like, on these countries by colonial rulers or by foreigners. But yet these names are glorious in their way because the countries have made these names glorious. It's not the name that makes the country. It's the country that makes the name. And besides, I think foreigners pronounce Burma much more correctly than they pronounce Burma. But when I speak Burmese, I always say Myanmar, of course, naturally.
Well, thank you for that. The second question is, do you think Myanmar can keep, should have said Burma, can keep its unique identity with the overwhelming power of China next door, and we might add India, and the power of multinational enterprises ready to invest and buy the resources of the country?
These are some of the challenges we have to cope with. With regard to India and China and our other neighbors, I would like to say with great pride that since independence, we've always managed to maintain a good neutral foreign policy. In the early days of independence, before we lost our democracy, we maintained very good relations, not just with our neighbors, India, China, Thailand, but also with the countries of the West. And in the days when we had very good relations with the United States and the Western countries, we also had very good relations with the Chinese Communist government. In fact, the democratic government of Burma was one of the first governments in the world to recognize the Chinese Communist government. So it does not mean that because we maintain warm and friendly relations with one bloc, we have to be hostile to the other. I think that we always have to maintain good relations with our neighbors. It's good policy, it's practical, and also it makes for a happier situation all around, not just for our countries, but for the whole region and for the wider international society. I believe we can do that. Now, the challenge of multinationals coming in will be a new one, and it is something that we have to meet with common sense, with intelligence, and with a lot of hard work. I'm a great believer in hard work. I always say, no hope without endeavor. If you hope for something, you have to work towards it. You can't just hope that it will happen. If we want our society to survive the new challenges that we're facing now, we'll have to work very hard to do that. But as I said earlier, we would also like to think that our friends will help us to achieve our goals.
I think the next question comes from somebody who knows that Pierre Omidyar has started an online newspaper here in Hawaii, and at the East-West Center works with journalists all over the region and is planning an international media conference next year in Burma. And the question is, what are your thoughts about media freedom in Burma? Have there been negative aspects of having press freedom, and what are the positive aspects?
I think there are always positive and negative aspects to every development. I'm very happy that we have greater media freedom in Burma now than we had in the past. This new freedom started only about a couple of years ago. I think basically it started around the time of my release towards the end of 2011. There have been there are now quite a number of independent journals and magazines, and we are soon going to be allowed to publish daily newspapers that do not belong to the state. Many new journalists, some young. I'm very hopeful with regard to the younger journalists because, of course, like a lot of young people, they're idealistic. But on the other hand, we have to be aware of the fact that the media these days has great power, and as people say, power sometimes corrupt. And some of our journalists are more intent on getting their articles published. They're more intent on popular news that will make a splash, than on news that will have a positive effect on society. Now, there are those who will say that it is not the job of a journalist to do anything positive for society. But I believe that it's everybody's duty to do something positive for the society in which he or she lives. I think this is a basic human responsibility. And I'm a great believer in responsibility. In fact, I go on about it ad nauseum, that a sense of responsibility is the most important characteristic for any law-abiding and responsible citizen. Responsibility, responsible citizenship, they go together. So with regard to the media, yes, there will be negative aspects to a free media because there will be those who will not use their freedom in the right way, let's put it that way. And there are those who will be responsible about their ability to influence the thoughts of the people for whom they're writing. So this is something we have to work towards all the time. I think you in the West are particularly aware of the dangers of unconsidered media freedom, in the sense that irresponsible, writing about anything and everything without any regard for whether or not they're writing about the truth. I was just discussing at the table that the Buddha taught that whatever you have to speak, what is the truth. But that's not enough. It has to be beneficial. First, it has to be true. Second, it has to be beneficial. And then third and fourth, it can be either acceptable or unacceptable to your audience. Acceptable in the sense that the audience might not be pleased by what they hear. Acceptable in the sense that whoever is listening to you would be pleased by what you say. So the first requirement, of course, is the truth. But that's not enough. If it's true and it does not benefit anybody in any way, it's better left unsaid. Now, I think this is something that a lot of media people could think about. Even if they are writing about what is true, does it really benefit anybody in any way? And then thirdly, what we believe is that if you offend people, if people who are listening to you don't like it, even if it's the truth and even if it is beneficial, sometimes you have to think about whether or not you should be the one saying it. It might be better said by somebody else. It might come better from somebody else. And of course, if it is acceptable, that's all right. But even if it is unacceptable, sometimes it has to be said in the interests of the society in which you live.
Thank you for that. We have a lot of news media in the room that I'm sure we're listening very carefully. The next question is about the Constitution, and it asks how you would amend the Constitution in two senses, what you would want to change, and then practically, are you able to change it through the current constitutional process?
What we want to change about the Constitution are those clauses which detract from democratic values. There are a number of them. We were discussing one in particular, which has a lot to do with me. This clause which says that anybody with a member of the family who has a foreign nationality would be debarred from taking up the presidency, the post of president. Now, the reason why I object to this clause is because it was written with me in mind. And I do not think it is right for any constitution to be written with anybody in mind, whether it is written to keep anybody in office for life, or whether it is meant to it is written with the intention of keeping anybody out of office for life. It's just not acceptable. It's not democratic, and it's not what a constitution is all about. There are, of course, other clauses to the Constitution which detract from democratic values. I'm most concerned about some of those which may put obstacles in the way of genuine union, because the aspirations of our ethnic nationalities are not fully met by the present Constitution. And unless we can meet those aspirations, we can never hope to build up a true and lasting union based on peace and harmony. So there are many things that have to be changed. Now, the different clauses of the Constitution require different ways of amendment. The most difficult, such as the one I'm talking about with regard to the presidency, would require a vote of more than 75% of the members of the legislature. Now, 25% are all nominated members of the military. So that means that, first of all the civilian posts, civilian seats would have to be filled. Some have not been filled for some reason. Their elections have not been possible in some constituencies. So first of all the 75 civilian seats would have to be filled. All the 75 civilians would have to agree to the amendment, and one brave soldier must also stand up and say that he stands by the civilians, because we require more than 75%. So that's a tough order. But I have to say that I'm not unduly worried by it. I think that the members of our military, like the rest of our nation, would like to see Burma a happier, stronger, more harmonious country. And because of that, I do not rule out the possibility of amendment through negotiated compromise. In fact, that is the way I want to go. I think the best solutions are the ones that are come about through negotiated compromise.
Thank you. You know, ironically, Dasu's father was the father of the Burmese military, but he disbanded that military and worked with the British on a peaceful process of transition to independence.
Well, that's why I'm very fond of the military, and I've often been criticized for saying that I'm fond of the Burmese army, but I can't help it. It's the truth.
The last question is a kind of personal question. It's what spiritual values fortified you during the 15 years that you were under house arrest?
Of course, I think the strongest spiritual value was the fact that I believe in spiritual values. I believe in the strength of the spirit. There are very many people who do not believe in spiritual values. They believe in intellectual values, but not in spiritual ones. And it's different. Spiritual and intellectual are not one and the same. I believe in the strength of the spirit, that if you have the right kind of spirit, you can overcome a great many difficulties better than any intellectual capabilities would allow you to do. And I think that was the value that will strengthen me, the very belief in spiritual values.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for coming.